Hello and welcome to the program. Today we're talking about Ukrainians who became famous in Hollywood. During the 10th Odesa International Film Festival, the documentary called From Ukraine to Hollywood has been presented to the audience. This film describes the achievements of Ukrainians from the past and how their path intertwine with Hollywood stories. To talk more about this, we're joined in the studio today by Stanislav Suknenko. He's a film expert, actor, director, member of the National Union of Cinematographers of Ukraine. Hello, and thank you for joining us. So first, and before we begin the interview and for viewers to understand, let's watch a little bit of a clip of this film you presented.
Если говорить о том, что значит для меня Голливуд, это как бы некая точка отсчета, с которой начинается все остальное.
Там буде Дастін Гоффман, там будуть всі ті інші люди, славні, їм будуть всім давати нагороду, і мені якусь нагороду хочуть дати.
I told him in this very room that we're sitting in, and he was sitting in this very chair. many stars in this chair.
Многие мне говорили, да, забудь про это дело, потому что это, во-первых, язык и все.
І подарували мені годинник Омега, той годинник, що Джеймс Бонд все носив.
Я не знаю, чи це правдиво так воно було, він так розказував, що один сидів тут, а другий сидів там. Вони дивилися, але разом не сиділи.
Було важливо знати, що я розумію, як це працювати на роботі, яку, в принципі, ти ненавидиш.
Now, this was a little bit of a clip of the movie. Now, this documentary tells about Ukrainian roots of many outstanding figures in Hollywood, and the film is directed by Alina Kovivchak-Sakno and you. So the script was written by you. So can you tell us more about the film and how many figures have been presented? Can you tell us more there?
Yes, last time we talked about the book, which was presented last year in Odessa Film Festival. So this year we presented film, and it was very exciting and interesting when after the presentation of the film, audience had chance to talk and ask questions, and it was questions about book. How is books doing? What about Ukrainian version? So it's lovely to have this audience which remembers you reading books and came to see the film, because we have full audience. And we don't invite many people because we just came for presentation our film. It was not in Odessa during the whole festival. We just came day before, presented film, and go home. But I want to say that interest was remarkable, and the reception was great too, because people said that they was moved, they laughed, they cried during the film. They opened for themselves so many interesting figures, and really it was the task to tell Ukrainians about people who got Ukrainian roots and make so many things in American culture and art. And of course, in book it was about 100 personalities. In films it was less, and about 10 people whom we find it, who worked in Hollywood and working today. So it's nowadays like young actress Ivana Sakhno, who actually was invited to that festival, be in a jury. And we couldn't be in a competition program because Ivana in the jury, so
was there, a bit of a conflict of interest.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we was put in a special screening, in a special event, and in that special program was remarkable films around the world, which from France was Agnès Varda film,
yes,
and
the famous filmmaker,
Miloš Forman. It was Ukrainian Sergei Loznitsa and Russian Vitaly Mansky, the great directors who did quite a remarkable film, documentary and feature film as well. So we had a good company to be put it in that. And Ivana Sakhno, young actress who goes through beginning to the end our film, representing new generation of Ukrainian talents who tried to make remarkable career in Hollywood.
Now, the idea of the... Did you already had the idea of the movie before doing the book? Was it just a continuity here, doing the book and then the movie, or was it just something that appeared after a while?
You know, because I'm a film historian, and my career was around movie and film studios and television. So exactly when I wrote the book, I thought about how it could be interesting to make a film, and I understood that a book was it's quite a work to find new materials, to find those remarkable figures, because when you're talking about Ukrainians in Hollywood today, people know a few names like Mila Jovovich, Mila Kunis,
Yeah, the big stars.
yes, 6 names and not more, and say, what about book? How many? And when I say it's 100, people very surprised because they're not expecting so many Ukrainians in that culture. So I understood, and it was quite a problem for film, that we couldn't used that amount of people. So we concentrated on people who got remarkable story in the past and rooted in Hollywood today.
How do you explain, as you said, there are many Ukrainians in this industry in Hollywood. How do you explain this presence of that many Ukrainians there in Hollywood?
You know, it's historically, we started story in a book about presence of Ukrainian in particularly America, in Hollywood, from beginning of the century. And it was the first wave of immigrants who came even before 1917, before October Revolution, especially from Western Ukraine. And of course, after revolution, it was another wave, and people tried to find a way to live in and to assimilate in another culture, another system. And it was quite interesting story when so many Jews from Eastern Europe came to California and started new business like movies and built it Hollywood and the rest, different talent. We're not talking about just actors and directors and producers. We're talking about artists, musicians, special effect masters, composers, and all those people with such a talent, decades by decades was involved. Another problem that in different sources they was called Russian and called Russian. Before that October Revolution, Ukraine was part of a Russian Empire. So our task was to put dot on E, who is Russian, who is Ukrainian in Hollywood. So it was another interesting point, because till today Russia say they are our actors and talents, but not actually the truth.
Did some of the people that you interviewed, that you did research on, kind of rediscovered the Ukrainian roots through the film? Yeah?
Yes, because it was very interesting. We didn't met with Dustin Hoffman, for instance, but in our film we're talking about Jack Palance, actor, and it's one point Jack Palance was invited in America to Ukrainian-Russian festival, and his friend explaining how it was. And when they came, it was Dustin Hoffman who was invited as well. And when he was presented I don't know, prize, and he said, oh, thank you, because my parents came from Russia, from Kiev, blah, blah, blah. And some Jack Palance after said, excuse me, I'm not Russian, I'm from Ukraine, and I know where my parents came. And he left that event. But Dustin Hoffman, I read it about him, it's few years ago, he went in America in a program where people try to find their roots. And he found out where his grandparents came, from Ukraine, from White Church, Белая Церковь. And he was very moved, because a very tragic story. And his parents never told him what happened to his grandparents, because they was executed here, and it's quite traumatic, a dramatic experience, and he never knew who his relatives was. So it's yeah.
So this is the case of Dustin Hoffman, but if we take the case of another another big star. Talking about David Duchovny, he said in 2014, back in 2014, he grew up thinking that I was Russian, but now I realize that I always been Ukrainian. Do you think, and would you say that the events of 2014, i.e. the Revolution of Dignity, also woke up certain conscience here?
I think it's very right, because recently I read about Leonardo DiCaprio, who also called Russian, and after he discovered that his grandmom was from Odessa, which again it's not really Russian. So it's interesting what goes on in Hollywood with Americans who was born in American families and not really knew till now roots where their relatives came from. And it's interesting because in our book we mentioned huge amount of musicians like Lenny Kravitz and Steven Tyler and Michael Bolton, who really say, like Steven Tyler or Lenny Kravitz especially, I'm from Ukraine, my parents from Ukraine. And when he was in this concert in Kiev, he said, hello, it's so lovely to back to home. So it's sweet, it's nice.
Now, it is quite interesting because it also shows a lot on the recognition also of Ukrainian identity outside. How does it help for at least Ukrainian identity, not only being represented by let's say, people who were born in Ukraine, but people who feel Ukrainian even though they were not born in Ukraine?
Yes, you know, in some time I lived in UK, and it was the beginning of 90s. And when people ask when you came from, I said Kiev, Ukraine, and always question was, are you Russian? And Ukraine at that time, people knew, because when I say no, it's Ukrainian, Kiev, oh, chicken Kiev, what they remember about Ukraine, you know, or Shevchenko as not a poet, a great Ukrainian poet and footballer player. But now, exactly when you say you're from Ukraine, people know that Ukraine is not Russia. Events of last years and how when we filmed in America and met with some people, they knew we're Ukraine, that we are different, they try to be helpful, friendly and supportive. And it's very, very important and nice to understand that you are from a country which not very well known, possible for many reasons. But today people in the world open and gladly take it what you presented from your country, because our book, our film, it's, as not me, many people said, it's representation of Ukraine through art, through culture, not politics. And it's very important to make image of Ukraine through things like that.
Now, we spoke about big names here who have Ukrainian roots, and you, at the beginning of the interview, spoke about the young generation of Ukrainians. How do you see this young generation, as you said, of artists, musicians, actors, evolving, potentially evolving in the international scene of any arts?
Some people said to me, well, you're doing such a film, you're writing books. Is it you give chance people go out of the Ukraine? I said, you try to push them. I said, no. I just try to say that today border more open than years and years ago. And if you have dream, if you have motivation, if you really want to achieve your dreams, you can travel, you can try Hollywood as well. It's not mean that you need go and you will be successful there. No, but I see talented people who really want to achieve something. They can try and do even Hollywood. But my idea, if people achieve something abroad, they need back to Ukraine with new experience, with new, I don't know, vision of the world, and do something for that country now, today, with that experience. Because it's understandable that before we not make things when people want to live, work, and will be in demand any talents, and not just creative people. People will travel and look where they will accept it. So my idea, let them go, but they always welcome back. And that story, Ivana Sakhno, who goes through his film, she said that sometimes she banned by agents speak Ukrainian because she need play characters who is not Ukrainian in Hollywood movies. But she said it's not meaning that I'm not Ukrainian or I don't love Ukraine. Different things. If you want to be Ukrainian, you always will be, because it's not just language, it's who you are and where you came from. But you can work anyway if you really, really want, and if you know what your calling is.
Now, your film, your book have been presented in the Odessa Film Festival. This festival, on the scene of festivals, is fairly new. Why is it important to have more and more people coming to the Odessa Film Festival? And how is it important today?
No, first of all, it's Ukrainian cinema now goes stronger and stronger. And it's very rare in a previous year that Ukrainian films got awards, one. In that Odessa Film Festival, 2 Ukrainian films got Grand Prix, 2, not 1. They share Grand Prix. One documentary film, in section documentary film, got Grand Prix. Ukrainian actress got a prize for female best role. And it means that today in Ukraine, because a few years ago, we said that it's no finance of art, especially cinema, but culture need to be in any situation, because culture can change, politics can change people, different issues. And now Ukrainian cinema goes stronger and stronger, as I said. And those festivals are very important, because we not just see what people doing, we're presenting what we are doing. And it's very important to have feedback, because I know it's many talented people around. Not everybody can go through that finance from government, you know, that Ukrainian state film agency money for films. But it's not mean that they couldn't do movies or be actors. And it's very important to have that unity of cinematographers from around the world, because it's sharing ideas, it's co-productions, because several films, Ukrainian, in different festivals, festivals, got prizes and presented as a co-production. And it's very important as well.
Now, and to conclude this interview, we talked about big figures, and Ukraine talked about festival in Ukraine. Just in general, as you see this emergency, this rise of Ukrainian cinema, what is particular in this new kind of new wave of Ukrainian cinema right now that maybe could interest Western movie and Western countries movie, and could bring to the West? I'm thinking When the Trees Fall recently, who brought magic realism back to life. Can it bring back that kind of Ukrainian style there around?
I think it's an interesting question, because a new generation of Ukrainian cinematographers, they orientated for European and worldwide cinema. They try to be original, but they won't be dynamic, and cinema have changed. Of course, you're talking about Ukrainian cinema, or that poetic cinema, which was remarkable in 60s and 70s, and it's don't look like any cinemas in the world. But in those period, 60s, French got new wave, and it was interesting period. And of course today, again, it's question about that border opened for new ideas, for co-production, for new look in cinema, because in 60s, 70s, film was filmed on tape. Now it's digital and blah, blah, blah. Now that state agency for film, I see how many, not just Ukrainians film applied, but co-production, for instance, with European directors, with Americans who try to do historical films based on Ukrainian history, but quite a big scale, which looks like Hollywood or European, just to give chance Ukraine go in that commercial way and widen the frames. And it's quite a lively process. We couldn't say that everybody wants just to be like European films looks, or it's I think a new era for Ukrainian cinema which got roots, and slowly some back to those roots and try to be new and modern according world cinema, and it's probably everywhere happening something like that.
Well, thank you very much for coming in our studio to talk about cinema and Ukrainian roots of stars. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today.
Thank you, it's my pleasure as well.
That was Stanislav Suknenko, film expert, actor, director, member of the National Union of Cinematographers of Ukraine. Thank you for watching the program and stay tuned for the rest.